something goes in a program or a computer system, we tell that there's a bug in the system. Bug is an unexpected problem with software or hardware. When there is a bug, system behave in a way that is not intended by developer. So we will concentrate on the bugs in the stored code. So these are the type of errors that can occur in a source code. We can get syntax. There can be syntax errors. Syntax errors are errors occur when we violate the syntax rules. It's like when we do grammatical mistake in a natural language. Okay, so when there's a syntax error, that means we have violated the grammar rules of Python. Okay, for example, if you look at natural language, this sentence contains a syntax error because it should start with a capital T. Okay, so that violates the grammar rule in natural language. So there is a grammatical error. So syntax errors are like these grammatical errors. When we violate the syntax rules of that language, we get syntax errors. Okay, so this sentence missing a period at the end, so that is also a grammatical error, so like a syntax error. Normally human reader can ignore small grammatical errors and still read a paragraph and get the idea. But Python computer languages, even there's a small syntax error, it will complain and raise an error. It will not execute. Okay, here is an example of a syntax error in Python. Here we forgot to close the quotation marks. Here we start the Python with double quotation mark, but we forget to close it here in the end. So if you run this code, it will give a syntax error. It will give a syntax error. Other type of errors in a source code is logic errors. Okay, if there is a logic error, the program will run without complaining, but it will behave it will not generate any error message, but it will behave in an unintended way. Okay, it will not do the right thing that we are expecting it to do. So the logical errors are hard to find because that we don't understand how the program works. Okay, so they are harder to spot. Example of a logical error, this program. Okay, so definition, sum AB, we are returning A minus B. So if we execute this program and execute the sum function, it will run without complaining, but it will give a wrong result. Okay, we are expecting to get the addition, but it will give the subtraction. So this is example of a logical error. Okay, so if you run this code with sum 3 and 2, it will give 1. We are expecting it to give 5, but it will give 1. Okay, so this is example of a logical error. Other types of errors are called runtime error. Okay, so this is called the runtime error because it's not appear until we run the program. This is especially noticeable in compiled language. Okay, if there's a syntax error, compiled language give an error it will not run. But if there is a runtime error, when we compile the program, it will create the exe file without giving any errors. Error will only occur when we run the program. In interpreted languages, it will be executed at once soon as we interpret the language, so it will generate the error. Okay, so these runtime errors, you will not encounter these runtime errors until you start writing a little bit more complicated program. Okay, they are called also exceptions. These runtime errors are also called exceptions, because when runtime error happens, something exceptional is happening. This is example of a runtime error. If you divide 3 by 0, it will not give any syntax error, but it will give a runtime error when the program is executed. Okay. Now, this is important part for any programmer: debugging. Okay, that means finding and removing the bugs. Okay, that means finding the errors and fixing your code. Okay, debugging is the process of finding and fixing errors or bugs in the source code of any software. Okay, when the software don't work as expected, computer programmers study the code to determine why any errors occurred. Okay, so debugging involves these steps: reading, running, remunerating, retreating. Okay, so reading means you have to carefully examine and read your code. Okay, by doing that, you can usually identify syntax errors and correct that. Okay, logical errors you cannot find by reading the code, because when you wrote the code, you are thinking something wrong, you are making a logic error, so you are making a logical mistake, so the error is in your head, so you will not see it unless you run the program. Okay, so if you run the program, when it's not producing the expected outcome, you can realize the error. Okay, so then you can experiment by checking the output at each stage and compare the output with the desired result, and you can try to identify the error. For example, that logical error in the sum situation, when you run the function, you will realize that it is giving the subtraction instead of addition when you try with several different inputs. Okay, this is means deciding, thinking little bit deep to try to figure out what is the type of the error and things like that. Okay, this is a syntax, runtime, or logical errors, also called semantics errors. Okay, so try to identify the type of the error and thinking a little bit more thoroughly about your error and type of error is include this. Okay, retreating means when you write the program, normally you build it step by step. Retreating means go to the step program was working, last point the program was working, and try to rewrite it from there. Okay, people tend, new programmers tend to avoid this step because you have to delete the written code. So if you have doubts, you can save the current code and as a copy and delete the code in a new version, and then try to go to a point it was working and then try to figure out what part is working. Another option you can do is, without deleting, you can comment the lines of code. Okay, we will learn about commenting later. So this way you can figure out what was the program last working, and then looking at the modifications you made and try to figure out what modification introduced the error. Okay, when debugging you have to do all these steps. Okay, just changing the program without reading and thinking will not work. Okay, that is called random walking. Okay, it's an error programmers tend to do. If you just keep changing the program randomly until you come up with the right one, it will take long time. Okay, it's not a good way to do. So you have to read and think while examining the output and changing the code and analyzing the results like that. Okay, so you have to use all these steps. In the beginning of your programming career, you will normally get a lot of syntax errors. You will spend more time reading the code and identifying the syntax errors and fixing them. As you gain practice, you will make lesser syntax errors, and you will be able to find them quickly. Okay, when we develop a complicated software package, it's extremely rare to come up with a version without errors. Okay, so you output a version and then put a new version by fixing the bugs. Okay, that's why we get new versions of updates telling bug fixes. If you take example for your Android OS, you get new versions fixing versions time to time. Those versions usually fixing bugs. Okay, so we saw how to write the Python code in command prompt in the Python interpreter. Okay, but if we are writing a complicated programs, that will not work. Okay, one way to do it, we need an editor. One way to do it, write it in a text editor and then run it, save it and run it using the Python interpreter. Okay, but we will not practice that method right now. For a large programs, that is not very good. Okay, it can be useful in certain situations. We'll talk about them later. For when we are writing complicated programs, we use what we call this integrated development environment IDEs. Okay, so they contain text editors developed for these languages. Okay, it contains a source code editor, that means a text editor where we can write and edit our code. Okay, then we have this, they come with a debugger, something to help in the debugging process. Also it comes with automation tools. That means when we try to type print, when we type the few letters, it will suggest the name of the print function. We will see examples later when we use a IDE. Okay, also we have something called syntax highlighting. So it uses different colors to show the syntax and syntax errors. Okay, so by the color changes of the code, you can identify syntax errors. Okay, So these are very helpful. Okay, we will see our first. There are a lot of different types of IDEs related to a programming language. Okay, we will see our first IDE in the next video.